Can we turn now to you? And we really do want you to be very much involved in this. We want to learn from you as well as we want to learn from our speakers up on the platform here. So who would like to start? Yes, excellent. If you just say who you are.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers. My name is Ismeta Dervoz and I'm member of the Parliamentary Assembly of Bosnia and Herzegovina, House of the Representative. I'd like to contribute to this seminar first with a few words about my country. Bosnia and Herzegovina is considered primarily a transit country for drug trafficking due to its location along traditional Balkan smuggling routes and between drug production and processing centers in Southeast Asia and markets in Western Europe. Bosnia achieved improvements in reducing the flow of illicit narcotics through its territory in 2012 and improved capacity of law enforcement and security institutions at the levels of government. It, however, requires further enhancements. In past, faced with the competing demands, the government has prioritized its limited law enforcement reduced on problems such as investigating and proceeding war crimes, counterterrorism and trafficking in persons, and has not developed comprehensive counter-narcotics intelligence and enforcement capabilities. But this is changing. Bosnia has a state counter-narcotics coordinatory body and a commission for the destruction of illegal narcotics. Our law enforcement agencies have increased cooperation with regional and inter-regional law enforcement counterparts and have often, in cooperation with neighborhood countries, succeed in making narcotics-related arrests and seizures. I would like to underline one I think, increasing and huge problem in our region. It is a problem with new drugs, new home-manufactured drugs, which became more and more popular in the Balkan regions and in countries like Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We've got the data for that. Let's just say that in street name, crocodile drugs of a home manufacturer synthetic heroin products that is very popular in some countries and has been cited as the drug that eats addicts. I would like to say that the very interesting is that a Google inquiry of the phrase legal heights produced 81 pages of response listening with the 810 individual web pages addressing the topic and avenues of purchase of homemade recipes. The internet has made it easier not only to acquire synthetic drugs, but also provide drugs users of world-big users with the readily available mechanisms to share their highs and other drug-related experiences online. I would like very much if Mr. Griffin can maybe say a few words about this.
Thank you.
There is a whole line of synthetic or herbal products that are emerging, of which many have been targeted yet by law enforcement. Another problem is that the emerging drugs are most home manufactured, and for them how to do it information can be found via internet, as I said.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Paul Griffiths, can you respond to that question?
Well, just to say, I think there is a rate. I think that we in Europe trying to assess the availability of these drugs and then respond appropriately and proportionately to those ones that appear to be causing harm. But I do think overall we're seeing a move in the future to synthetic drugs that be manufactured near to intended marketplaces. And the question there is how one responds to that challenge. At the moment, I think you've got one side of the argument, which is can we put hundreds and hundreds of chemicals under control, which clearly seems problematic. At the other, and what do we do to very toxic substances that are being produced and consumed by people who aren't aware what they're consuming. So I think it's a real policy challenge.
Can I just pose a question to you, Paul? Paul, can I just pose a question? The EU produced a draft regulation on legal highs. Are you aware of that draft?
Yes.
I'm sure you wrote it.
No, I didn't write. I stress I didn't write.
Can you give us any indication about where that draft regulation is in terms of how near it might be to being passed, whether it's likely to be passed, and what the implications would be?
It's currently under review by our member states. The Commission has made a proposal. The proposal is intended to speed up the way we identify new substances, and then to allow us a more rational mechanism for assessing their danger and acting quickly. However, it is for Europe. It puts control at the European level, and many member states may feel that it has an issue in respect to subsidiarity. So I think we will have some interesting debates over the next year or two on this subject.
Oh right, a year or two. So we've got no immediate prospect of having this draft regulation passed. Any other questions? We have got 10 minutes if you want to use them to make a point or comment or question. Though try and keep them brief actually, because it's nice if lots of people can.
Somos de Chile. Mi nombre es María Angélica Cristi.
I'm Maria Helica Christi, and we are constantly debating regarding drugs and whether we should legalize or not when it comes to marijuana. And I would like to follow on from what Robert Del Picha said, who said that we should never forget to fight against drugs and the people who are addicted. And what does that imply? I think that as an aim cannot be outside this debate, because that means we all must work to make sure that we include all these people, and we cannot forget that aim. It's a very dramatic situation. We know that public health is very essential, and we know it's very difficult to rehabilitate a drug addict. In our country, we've made huge efforts on prevention, but equally, we still have a high level of consumption of heroin. It's gone up. And the thing is that because we're further away from other countries, we seem to be more behind. And it's different from what happens here, but we've had a situation where we've had this debate about the possible legalization of marijuana for the reasons that you have outlined, and we try to educate the population and let them know that it is not an innocuous drug, that it actually has harmful effects. So I want to ask you, how do you actually deal with this situation where you actually try and avoid the sanctions against drug trafficking, but you also try and legalize the drug? Regarding the new psychoactive substances, we found that children at school want to actually get hold of silicone, and it actually is producing new addictions. We have achieved in actually approving some hard legislation against tobacco. We produce in Chile great wines. We all know that. They're very good in Chile. But we've worked hard to actually, French wines are very good as well, and Australian wines are great, but Chilean wines are also great. So it actually makes make it more difficult for us as a big wine producer to actually regulate alcohol consumption. But we've actually managed to reduce consumption of tobacco. We've only got one company, the British American Tobacco Company. And I want one last comment. Gentleman who made the comment about the harm related to alcohol and deaths related to alcohol in comparison to drug-related deaths and drug-related harm. And I think that sort of comparison is very dangerous, because in that sense you could say, well, if we can consume drugs, and we'll just stay away from alcohol and tobacco. And the thing is that there are more millions of people who actually consume alcohol and drugs in comparison to drugs. So I don't actually think these statistics are truly comparable. And I hope that helps you as a Chilean. And I understand that our Uruguayans have established a new reform in their country, and I think it would be very interesting to actually know what they've done in Uruguay as well. Bueno, amigos.
I have to say that on the problem of decriminalization or legalization, in each country there is a different political debate. In France, there is a political debate, and recently a minister said he was in favor of liberalizing cannabis consumption, and others would be completely against it. So this is a real debate, and this is a real difficulty. And at the moment, I have no answer. There is no answer. There are a few countries, we know who they are, who went in this direction, which my colleague perhaps regrets. No, I don't regret it, not at all. On the contrary, no. That's right, and I know that is the case. But in the case of France, if you think of cannabis, you have people who grow it at home. They grow their own cannabis at home and consume it. And in France, 11% of cannabis consumption is homegrown, self-cultivation. So it's important to have a debate on this, because if you grow your own and you consume it, but you don't sell it, should you really punish them in the same way as if you are dealing, and perhaps dealing heroin? I think this is a real debate that has to be done.
One last question, okay? Yeah, little question.
Thank you. I want to ask you about EU regulation. It means absence of EU regulations, and what means that in the context of single economic space in EU, and also in the context of different regulation between member countries. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Maybe, I don't know, Paul, do you want to reply to that, or not? Somebody else, or Ruth? Robert?
Non, mais c'est exactement ce que je viens de...
That is exactly what I was saying. You're just going further. Once you have proposals at international level, can you coordinate things between different countries? Because, as I was saying, traffic doesn't know borders. It is transborder. So if we are not able to regulate at a higher level, at a more global level, there will always be problems between countries, or because of differences between countries. So the ideal situation, or is it really an ideal situation, is to go towards something which can be improved upon. If you allow me, I think there is no policy which doesn't have adverse effects. And I think the question is to know whether the adverse effects are acceptable or not, and to what limit, to what extent they are. And the evaluation done by the Global Commission is that the adverse effects of the regulation we have as of today are unacceptable and are too high and too negative. Therefore, we have to change the policy, not the conventions, but the policy. Now, two things I'd like to say about your question. You were saying, is it possible to do something at international level without interfering with other countries? If you think of the EU, but you could also think of the United States of America, or America in general as a continent. I think it is the case. I think if we are able to regulate the market, I'm not saying if we liberalize it completely, if we regulate the markets, and if we tolerate, which is what was done previously, production and consumption of cannabis, for example, that is possible. We can make sure that it cannot be sold to young people. We can make sure it cannot be sold abroad. We can make sure production is controlled. We can make it compulsory for people who produce respect different limits, for example, THC in different products. I think if you look at the Netherlands, once Netherlands moved the coffee shops from the border with France, the problem disappeared. The problem of French people who came over the weekend to the Netherlands to take drugs. So I think really when there are cross-border problems, I think these can be solved. I have talked to many neighboring countries of Switzerland to try and find a way, see how we could do what we thought was necessary to meet the needs of our population and not interfere with other countries. To the representative from Chile, yes, I am in favor of regulating the cannabis market, not liberalizing completely, but regulating. I think you have to make a distinction between cannabis and other products. Cannabis is consumed widely, and I think it can be regulated in a similar way that tobacco or alcohol are regulated. And I can only see advantages. And again, it is about breaking up markets. It is about controlling markets. It is about taking away those very lucrative markets from a crime as far as cannabis is concerned. But I am convinced that depending on the substance, you would have to find different forms of regulation, prohibition, or use limited to medicinal use. And we have a huge task in front of us. We have done it for tobacco. You might remember tobacco used to be allowed everywhere. Now smoking is forbidden in most public places, restaurants, etc., in most places in Europe. I was the one who started the legislative proposal at the time. In Italy, people were saying that would never work. It is now working. It is applied everywhere. Je crois que
More than 1 minute, just to make a point, and then I'll wrap up this.
Yeah, thank you. It's, as far as the last bits of the discussion go, cannabis is really the problem in terms of the way in which the control system deals with it. Because cannabis is at the moment controlled with the same degree of severity as heroin and cocaine. Everybody knows that it's less dangerous than heroin and cocaine, but the system is blunt to changes on this, and that issue needs to be tackled, and that has to be tackled by the membership of the United Nations collectively.
That's extremely helpful, actually, from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Can I just end this session by thanking our 4 speakers very, very profusely for their excellent contributions. Also for the many contributions from all of you. I'd just like to pick out a few little points that I'm sure we're going to come back to over and over again. The growing issue of legal highs. The issue that transit is also a problem in Europe as well as in West Africa and Latin America. So I think we have a lot to learn from those other 2 continents. I think we're delighted to learn about the West African Commission established very recently, to which Ruth Dreyfus is going. We were reminded about the terrible plight of people in Asia who are executed or put away for many, many, many years as a drug user. And the last little point that came up, the really important issue about dealing with cannabis completely differently from the way it has been dealt with in the past. And I think Ruth Dreyfus' contribution on that was extremely helpful. In fact, those are the sort of words I keep using over and again, that there are such benefits from moving to a different way of dealing with cannabis. So those were just a few of the crucial issues that came up in this first session. And I hope you found it interesting and helpful. And I think now, can we just thank our speakers, and then I just want, but just before we do that, can I say, when we've finished, can you follow people like Sophia with an orange ribbon down the front, and there are two there and two there. Take everything with you, all your belongings with you. But before we do that, can we just thank our speakers very much indeed.